Twilight Payment. What a ride, what a win in a cup we'll never forget. Has won it from Tiger Mom.
The lead narrowly. Here's Prince of Penzance coming on down the outside. Prince of Penzance for Michelle Payne.
That's right. Who do you think you are? I am.
McCavey Diva. A nation roars for a hero. She's starting to wind up. But a champion becomes a legend. McCavey Diva has won it from over Ottersburn. Excellent.
Hello, units, and welcome to 2 Units, 1 Cup, the podcast that stops a nation. We're going to be taking an in-depth look at the 164th running of the Melbourne Cup this Tuesday. My name is Nick Foote. The man that's going to help me do that is one of the best form analysts in the game, Dave Strelaw. Good afternoon to you, David.
Yes, good to be here, Nick. Welcome to all 2 Units listeners, new and old. We're obviously on board this year with Clubby Sports as well, so hoping to bring a few new people into the 2 Units podcast. And what better way to do it than to analyse runner by runner the Melbourne Cup. It is easily my favourite race on the Australian racing calendar, one that I love to bet into, one that I love the stories through as well. There's always great narratives, and this year's going to be no different.
Absolutely, and you can turn it sideways. We always say to our unit army, turn it sideways, watch the races on the weekend. You can turn it sideways now and watch us on Spotify or YouTube.
Yeah, how good is that?
So
we
good.
love turning it sideways, but hopefully, we've got the public holiday down here in Melbourne. There won't be any turning it sideways. We'll be behind the big screens or at the track or around the barbecue with some friends. And if you're new to racing, we're just going to give you a little bit of information that perhaps when you're standing around that barbecue on Tuesday, you can just drop a few sly things to some of your mates and they might think you're a bit of an expert.
Well, this is what it's all about. Like the water cooler chat on a Monday, you've got that cocky office worker or that mate you work with. If you want to drop them a little fun fact about one smooth operator or whoever it is you might be siding with today, we're going to bring you that.
Yeah, and we're a 2-man business. I know what it's like to work with someone that's way too cocky.
Really? Is that right?
It might be.
Yeah, well,
I got in there first because you had it coming for me.
Well, I actually did. And I tell you what, I turned on the TV this morning and I thought, I'll just ease into the day, watch a little bit of the racing channel.
The silver screen, of course.
The one Sultan pops up sitting next to Damien Oliver. It was a little bit of goat meat goat.
Yeah, it was quite extraordinary, actually. I had to pinch myself. So for those of you that don't know the background of the units, Nick and I met teaching skill, high school physical education, and we've both been working in racing media for about 3 years. But prior to that, we were teachers and full-time teachers, and I was sort of looking over my left shoulder this morning, and I'm sitting on a panel dissecting the Melbourne Cup next to Damien Oliver, the greatest jockey of all time. He'd won 3 himself, and I just thought, what am I doing here? So I thought, I need a bit of an upgrade here in terms of my form analysis. I'm going to sidle up with my mate Footy and do another show.
That's true. I thought at one stage you were going to poo-poo his speed map and how the race was going to be run, but you didn't quite get that far ahead of yourself just yet.
Yeah, I just don't know him close enough yet as well. But there was a few things, a few runners that I thought might settle in some different positions. Lucky we've done our own 2-unit speed map.
Yeah, this is the premier form reference here today. If you're dissecting the Melbourne Cup, this is the show you want to be listening to. But before that, we've got to paint the picture of what Flemington's going to look like. And I'll tell you what, she's pretty hot in Victoria here the last couple of days. She was a blustery Derby day. We've already had one race to kick off the 4-race carnival here, the Flemington Carnival, of course. And it's 25 again. I'm assuming the track's going to be pretty firm.
Yeah, it will be. It'll likely be getting to a good 3 by the time the Melbourne Cup is run. They'll want to put plenty of juice into the track, though. They'll start the race on the top end of a good 4 and it'll improve throughout the day given the sunny conditions. Worth noting, though, that the winds are from the south-southeast, but they're very light. They're not going to have an impact. And in horse racing, wind plays a major part because if you can get some protection from the wind when it's in your face, well, you save a lot of energy. If you watch the races on Derby Day, the wind was howling from the north in the face of leaders in the circle races, and it made it impossible to lead and win. It's not going to be that scenario at Flemington on Cup Day. We're setting up, and I'm really confident it's going to be a fair track come Tuesday.
Yeah, well, that's all we want. That's all punters want, a fair track. And before we get into our runner-by-runner analysis, we're going to take a look at all 24 runners' hopes in this year's Melbourne Cup. We'll take a little bit of a squiz at the market. And as you can see here, the show once again powered by TopSport, our great mates over there, and the team have been on board for a solid 3 years now. We got Buckaroo and Vauban. They're the top 2 fighting out. Saddlecloth 1 and 2 as well, if you don't mind. They're at around $6 at the moment. One smooth operator, Your Geelong Cup winner is at $8. We have Sea King, who's your Bendigo Cup winner, at $9.50. And then we get out to a few double-figure chances, the likes of Absurd, who's a $10 hope, who is the stablemate of the current favourite Vauban as well. But we'll get through these and we'll go through each of the runners in depth and we'll give you their best chance as we go. But TopSport are also offering a fantastic offer here tomorrow, being Monday, from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. They're betting 110% markets on the Cup. So they're guaranteeing that you can win $10,000 betting into a 110% market. That's from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. on Monday, Australian Eastern Standard Time. So if you like something now, even at a bit of odds, and the market probably won't move too much in the next sort of 24 hours, it might be worth holding off salts till 3 o'clock.
Yeah, without doubt, you'll be getting a much better price between those hours of 3 and 4 o'clock, with the markets coming down to 110%. That just means that every horse at their current price, when they chop down that market percentage, just gets pushed slightly. So you get some slightly better prices on any runner should there be no moves between Sunday afternoon and Monday 3 o'clock.
Let's kick into the speed map now, mate. It's really important to see where the horse is going to be able to settle in the run. And you've come up with your speed map. It's called the Salty Speed Map, let's be honest. And I'm assuming with any race with a Waterhouse bot runner engaged that they might take up proceedings.
Yeah, Just Fine is our leader, Waterhouse bot, and Jai McNeil, we've seen him go forward and lead all the way, which is terribly difficult to do in a Melbourne Cup. He won the Melbourne Cup aboard Twilight Payment, leading all the way, rating that overseas galloper to perfection. He is our leader. There's just no two ways about it. It's highly doubtful any other horse takes up the running. In terms of early pressure, there's not a great deal of go-forward horses. I think Akita Sushi rolls forward. Athabascan gets a nice run in behind the speed. Manzoice is a horse that can have a bit of tactical versatility. He'll press with Positivity and Fancy Man. The two stablemates, the Willie Mullins stablemates, Absurd and Vauban, the overseas visitors, they'll get nice runs in behind the speed. Seeking Barrier 1 could be a bit tricky. Declan Bates, who rode him in the Bendigo Cup, isn't riding on the weekend, Holly Doyle, but Declan gave a great ride in the Bendigo Cup to get him off the fence. He's a horse that can get keen and pulling.
Declan a great ride, didn't he?
Yeah, well, he said it's time to go, but from Barrier 1, he's sort of going to have to weave his way through. And then we look at some of the key hopes in the market. Buckaroo. The Melbourne Cup start point, there is a very long run to the first bend. So if you're drawn out, you can stay out wide for a while and not have to cover any more ground than the horses that are closer to the fence because they're not going around a bend. So you can sum things up. The Melbourne Cup is a race where I don't really care about barriers. Would I prefer Buckaroo if I'm a Buckaroo backer to be drawing barrier 10 over 21? Yes, I would. But it's not enough to leave me out of a horse because just so much needs to go right. And it's just all about flowing into the race at the 800 and finding the back of the right horse as opposed to doing early work or having to drag back from a wide gate.
So there's the speed map. What about the tempo and talking through our listeners and viewers? How important is tempo in a Melbourne Cup and wanting to be with these runners that you know are going to run out the 3,200 metres?
Yeah, so if you've got two horses of equal ability, and let's just say at the end of 3,200 metres, they can run their last 600 metre split in 34 seconds. Well, if you're positioned 5 lengths ahead of a horse with the same ability, and you can reel off the same last 600 metre split, you're going to beat that horse home because that horse physiologically can't run home in those sectionals that you can and match you. They'd need to run home 5 lengths faster than you. So if you're settling back and there's no tempo there, you need to have a better sprint than horses in front of you. And the tempo is really important in Melbourne Cup as well because if you're a horse that has a question mark on running 3,200 metres, and it's really fast run and becomes a real test of stamina, that's going to suit fit, tough stayers as opposed to really brilliant horses as well. This Melbourne Cup in particular just looks to be run at an average or below average tempo. There's not a great deal of early speed and pressure on Just Fine, but he does have a relatively high cruising speed when he's at sort of 2,500 metres. So if that then translates to 3,200 metres, I don't suspect he sort of sits them up and sprints. So I've sort of envisaged this race as then bunching up, coming to the bend, and perhaps the most brilliant horse being able to win the race and just flowing into the race at the right time.
we'll go through the runners in saddlecloth order. And saddlecloth order is determined by how much weight the horses are carrying. And it's a really condensed weight scale in this year's Cup, just due to a couple of key scratchings as well. But our top weight, who's Vauban, carries 55.5 kilos, but there's only 5.5 kilos between the top weight and the bottom weight in the race. How much significance does weight play over 2 miles, over the 3,200 metres?
Really high significance. And what the handicapper is trying to do is he's trying to give a weight to each horse that would result in a 24-horse photo finish. But when you have some scratchings at the top of the weights, that compresses the weight from top weight to bottom weight. You mentioned the fact that there's not much of a spread from top weight to bottom weight. So that favours the horse at the top of the weights because they're the better horses in the race. There's a reason why they've been allocated higher weights is because they've been handicapped on their ability. They need to carry more weight to attempt to bring them back to the field. And when you're looking at analysing weight over 3,200 metres, the rough guide is about 1 kilo to 1 length. So if you're a really class galloper and you're giving a horse that has inferior form to you only 3 or 4 kilos, that can be a really huge advantage. So horses at the top of the weights aren't really disadvantaged in this year's Melbourne Cup.
Let's get stuck into it with the top weight. Horse number 1, Vauban, for Willie Mullins. William Buick rides in his 6th Melbourne Cup, draws barrier 11, and barrier 11 hosts the most amount of wins of any barrier in the Melbourne Cup with 9. Americain was the last to win there in 2010, and he was the race favourite last year, Saltsy. We did this show on a Sunday. It was $3.50. Yep. There was a lot of chat around him, but I think the training and the camp have put their hand up and said, we got it wrong last year. We're going a different approach.
Yeah, and that's a really strong point worth noting as well. A lot of time we can hear chatter from stables and it might be up to the listener to put on how much weight they put on that chat. But when a world-class stable like that says we got it wrong and we're going to do it differently, you have to listen. And he's bringing in better form this year than last year. And it's also a weaker edition of the Cup.
Isn't that extraordinary? So what the market's doing just relative to that. I'm sure we'll talk about that as we go with the other competitors, but you're getting $6 this year when we're all on board at $3.50 with a better lead-in.
And it's probably because the market now has an Australian fail next to his name. He's failed in this race as favourite. He had some excuses. It was a very hot day last year. 25 and sunny is still pretty warm if you're coming from the Northern Hemisphere.
I did hear Willie Mullins have an interview saying we can cope with 25, but last year was too much. He was an absolute Calippo Frost in the mountain yard. He just melted.
He broke down, and if you're melting in the yard like an absolute Calippo Frost, then what that means is you're expending all your energy before the race, and you need to conserve your energy to be able to run out 3,200 metres. Let's whip through his form, his last 2 runs. So a couple back, he won the Lonsdale Cup Stakes at Group 2 level at York. He beat a horse that day by the name of El Nair. That horse then won his next start. He spanked a horse by the name of Gregory. That horse has form around Kyprios, form around Sweet William, who's beaten Point Lonsdale, who was only 2 lengths off Dubai Honour in June. So when you're doing your overseas form, for me, it's a bit different to the Australian form. It's relying a bit less on data and numbers and more so who have they beaten, how do we tie them into good horses. So the form through his win a couple back at Group 2 level, very good. The form through his last start, runner-up at Group 1 level.
This is where it's hot.
Yeah.
This is where we get talking.
The Group 1 Irish St Ledger on a good track, he has only been beaten by Kyprios, who's an Aidan O'Brien galloper that's won 15 from 19. He's quinelled 17 of his 19 starts, multiple Group 1 winner, and on some ratings ranked as the number 2 horse in the world. And Vauban met him at level weights, 62 kilos, and that was over the 2,800 metres. And the start prior to that, he'd won over 3,300 metres on good tracks. That's the real A-class staying form leading into this. Proven at the trip, bringing in great form. He gets weight relief on last start. He's got a nice gait as well to not be too far off the speed if they run it slowly. He has to be one of the leading chances.
Currently $6 TopSport shares favouritism with horse number 2, Saddlecloth 2, Buckaroo for Chris Waller. The Magic Man, Joe Moreira, rides and draws barrier 21, which some people are saying, oh, this is a fair bit of a negative and it's going to have to go back. Well, we don't have to go back too far to see Vow and Declare, who won this race from barrier 21 in 2019, Salts. And there were question marks him leading into the Caulfield Cup. Will he run out the 2,400 3,200 metres. Well, he did, and it was probably the run of the day, albeit beaten. But he looks a mighty good chance. But can he run out the 2 miles?
Yeah, back to his barrier, 21. That was a brilliant ride from Craig Williams on Vow and Declare. He's a bit different, Buckaroo, as he's not going to go forward. He'll float back. But if you followed Buckaroo since he was gelded, you would have won a buck or two because he's been good this preparation. His 2 wins came paying $7 and $9. When he paid $9, that was in an Underwood Stakes at Caulfield, Group 1 weight for age level. So when you're preparing a horse for handicap races, Chris Waller, his last 3 runs, he's been kept to weight for age, which means that he doesn't his last start was in a Caulfield Cup where he could have incurred a penalty, but his previous form, he'd been kept to weight for age, so he wasn't getting any penalties. You know, he won a Group 1 at Caulfield 3-back, but was at weight for age, so he kept the same weight for the Caulfield and Melbourne Cups. So he's bringing the weight for age top shelf form in Australia. He won a fast run Underwood, which is important to have fast races in horses preparing for 3,200 metres because that brings them on fitness-wise. He was really good, only beaten by VS Sistina in a Turnbull. Her subsequent start to winning that Turnbull was probably the greatest Cox Plate performance of all time, at least equal to one of Winx's. It was just the most brilliant performance I think I've seen on a race course. That's top shelf form. And then his Caulfield Cup run, it was a day where it was impossible to come from back and wide at Caulfield and win on Caulfield Cup Day, and he was the only horse to do it in the Caulfield Cup. Home hard off a genuine tempo again. There were question marks on him running at 2,400 metres in the Caulfield Cup. He sizzled through the line. So, yes, there's natural question marks on him at 3,200 metres considering he hasn't ticked the box, but when you're analysing form, you're seeing a horse come through fast races, that's strong late in fast races. That is a really good sign that they're going to cope with the rise in distance.
Yeah, we call it the ultimate gear change when you get the nads done, and he was obviously a little bit colty, but the level of improvement Buckaroo has shown after that, he's just a completely different entity, isn't he? If you park his form prior to the gelding, he's a different horse.
Yeah, and if you wake up every day and you're looking at your nads in a jar beside your bed,
yeah,
you're really just understanding that it's time to perform because I've absolutely been gelded, and the rest is on me now. Once you have your nads cut off, you've just got to go to the next level, and he's done that.
He absolutely has. Let's move on to horse number 3 now, Circle of Fire. He draws the widest barrier, 24 for Kieran Ma. Mark Zara rides, who's won the past 2 Melbourne Cups, if you don't mind. He was a Sydney Cup winner. He was actually favourite for this race about 8 weeks out from the Melbourne Cup, but the prep just hasn't gone to plan as yet. I think the Kieran Ma camp, they need to get some kindling, they need to get some firelighters, and they need to try and spark this bonfire up.
I just need to stand in a circle around him and just give him positivity because he's off his best. He's winning the Sydney Cup, which was over 3,200 metres. There's over the specific distance of 3,200 metres. There's only 4 horses in the race that have won over the trip. He's one of them. And it was 4 starts back. It was it was as good a win as you'll see at a staying trip. He was very wide without cover. One of the other dangers in the market, Athabascan, had his back, still couldn't get past him. If he ran to that level, he's in the finish of this Melbourne Cup.
I thought 2-back, he showed a glimmer of hope through the Turnbull, but then he was just really disappointing in the Caulfield Cup, this is a genuine traditional lead-in, but he was just a bit flat, wasn't he?
His very best runs are on top of the ground, so I think he will appreciate getting away from wet tracks. His 3 runs this preparation have been on rain-affected surfaces. The knock on me in the Caulfield Cup is, yes, he was back and wide on a day it wasn't easy to do it, but a horse like Valiant King has run past him, who's a huge price in a Melbourne Cup. So on current form, I can't have him, but the rise in distance and the good track are in his favour.
Yeah, so 8 weeks out, he was $8 in futures markets. You can now get some, $41 on TopSport now for Circle of Fire. So if you want to put your eggs in the basket of the fire, recapturing some of that flame from the Sydney Cup, you will be rewarded with an enormous price. Let's move on to horse 4 now, Warp Speed, who's the Japanese runner. Noburu Takagi and Akira Sugawara rides, if you don't mind my Japanese there, Sultan. Last start, 13th in the Caulfield Cup. We have seen 2 extremely hyped Japanese runners in the past couple of weeks come to our shores. The likes of Prognosis, who went off favourite in a Cox Plate, Ascoli Pacino, who went off favourite yesterday and was heavily backed late in a Golden Eagle for $10 million. And they've both been turned over here in Australia. But Warp Speed, we've had a little bit of a look at him.
We have, and he went around in a Caulfield Cup. He went around at quite a big price in that Caulfield Cup, $26. He wasn't suited by the wet track that day. Japanese horses, they quite often race on good and firm tracks, so really hard surfaces. They like fast run races on firm tracks. So settling back at Caulfield on Cup Day was a disadvantage, and the wet ground was a disadvantage. They also went back because he drew barrier 16 there as well. So I think Asa or Akira Sugawara will be rolling forward from that low draw and attempt to settle him closer to the speed, which will be an advantage, particularly if they aren't walking. But on the contrary, he's probably going to relish a faster tempo run 3,000 metre race. Look, Group 1 form in Japan is generally Group 1 form everywhere because they have world-class racehorses. But I am of the opinion that the staying form in Europe is stronger than his 3,000 metre Japanese staying form. And also, we've seen him run in Australia, and although he had things against him in that Caulfield Cup, when you lead in run and you're only running in Australia, you're beaten over 16 lengths. You're pretty hard to make a case for.
Yeah, particularly when you've got key rivals in the same race as you.
Exactly.
Warp Speed, if Salts has sold you at all on Warp Speed, you're getting $35 there for.
I'm not sure he's going to be Warp Speed. It'll just be sort of medium speed.
That's rename.
Line and length
we'll
stuff.
put that through Racing Australia. We'll get the name
sorted. Medium speed.
Medium speed. Let's move on to horse 5 now. Kovalica, the 5-year-old for Chris Waller. This is the second of the 5 Chris Waller runners in the race. He's a $23 chance, Kovalica. His only time that he's raced over 2,400 metres, Salts, was when he won the 2023 Queensland Derby. He was last seen in the Cox Plate, 6th, finishing off pretty strongly. And we've seen that sort of run from a Waller runner in the past, haven't we? Maybe 2021.
Yeah, that Queensland Derby win you referenced was the last time he won back on the 27th of May 2023. He's had 15 starts since then. He's in career best form now, though. He's back a better horse. He raced through the Queensland winter, and you know, if you're winning a Melbourne Cup, you'd be expecting him to be running past Boy Star Gen or New Marion in some of those staying races up there. But his form this preparation's good. So a couple back, he's only 2 lengths off Chow Wolf, and then went and beat Prodigy in what was ultimately, in hindsight, her grand final, the mile race up there in Sydney. Very good behind Attrition in a Hill Stakes. That horse was good prior to that behind Mr. Brightside and Antino. That's absolute Group 1 form. And then you look at his run at Moonee Valley in the Cox Plate last start, and he was beaten 12 lengths, but his rating was actually really good. So for those of you that are new to the show and haven't heard people reference ratings, is what a rating does for a horse race is it attempts to compare performances from any given day on any given track around the world. So it's not the be-all and end-all, but it's a guide to how well a horse is performing. The higher their rating, generally the more talent the horse has and the stronger the race that they're coming through is as well. It's not the be-all end-all. It's just used as a guide. You've still got to watch your replays, make your own assessments, use your own judgments. But to be beaten 12 lengths and still run a good rating, it just goes to show that Via Sistina winning that Cox Plate was one of the most freakish equine performances ever seen on Australian soil. He was running through the line in that Cox Plate. Now, Chris Waller, grand final trainer, they've set him for a Melbourne Cup. Who am I to say that they're not put him on the right path? I would have loved to see him have a run at say 2,400 metres and just have another run under his belt to get the 3,200. But as far as Cups trial through a Cox Plate go, I thought last start was pretty good. He's a serious top 10 player. I couldn't find him in my top 4, but he'll run a good race on Tuesday.
Yeah, it's a great point you make around Chris Waller and grand finals too, and what an impact he's already had this spring setting some of his runners for grand finals because he's just absolutely airborne at the moment.
Let's have a look through them. He set Switzerland for a Coolmore, belted them,
which in hindsight,
I
and
know.
this is racing in a nutshell.
The only horse in the race was their grand final.
Yeah, exactly right. And I sat there on my couch yesterday and I was like, you need to go and have a cold shower and a long, hard look at yourself, because all of the signs were there.
I know.
A Coolmore horse in the Coolmore Stud Stakes, which
James
is,
McDonald.
we're talking like monopoly money that this stallion's now worth.
Yeah.
James McDonald on, the best jockey in the land. And we shopped around. So,
So he's peaked Switzerland via Sistina. He got to peak, not through traditional methods. She ran a few extra laps at Moonee Valley
Yes,
on the
she
Tuesday
did.
leading into that. But he not only got her to peak, he got her to run one of the greatest figures we've seen in ever since data's been recorded. Very elegant, peaked, a huge career peak in the Melbourne Cup. So he can get him to peak, and he's coming through that Cox plate that rated highly. He'll be running well.
maybe the battle with the Chris Waller runners, with 5 being in the Melbourne Cup, is just working out which one is actually on grand final day and which one was set for various races. But Kovalika, he certainly looks like the one, although untried at the distance, is screaming out for 2 miles in my eyes. Let's take a look at horse number 6 now, Sharp and Smart. He is the Kiwi visitor for Team Rogerson, trained by Graham and Deborah Rogerson over there. Mickey D, he will ride. And last start ran 3rd in the Moonee Valley Gold Cup, which is it's somewhat of a lead-up race, isn't it? There's a lot of runners here that we'll see coming through that Moonee Valley Gold Cup, which was won by Akita Sushi. Do you give Sharp and Smart much of a chance? Sides?
Not particularly. When you look at weights, he's got the 53.5 kilos, so he's paying for winning a Group 1 derby, a New Zealand derby. He hasn't won since he won that New Zealand derby. But when you have a look at a horse like him and the form he's in and the races he's coming through, to only be carrying a kilo less than Buckaroo, he needs several kilos off Buckaroo to be crossing the line with him. And there's horses that are better performed than him that actually have less weight. So I think he's poorly in at the weights. He grinded to the line last start in that Moonee Valley Gold Cup won by Akita Sushi. When a horse is sort of grinding away and appearing one pace over 2,500 metres, it's generally a pretty good sign that they will run over further. He just lacks the class that a lot of the other horses in the market have and the top chances have. I couldn't find a spot for him in my top 10. I'd back him to finish in the bottom 10 before I did the top 10.
Yep, and that's reflected in his price at $71 on TopSport. We'll take a look at horse 7 now, who's just fine for Gay Waterhouse and Adrian Bott. Draws barrier 13. Jai McNeil rides. We spoke about him in depth in the speed map. He was 10th in the Moonee Valley Gold Cup last start. He's rock hard fit. He'll be leading them up. And imagine the celebration from the owners if Just Fine could pull off something here, because part of the My Racehorse syndication, it's a micro shares, so there's about 45 million people in this horse. I think they might turn Flemington upside down.
Imagine someone has committed a crime and there's a mob forming and they start chasing that person, and the mob's getting closer and closer and they start looking over their shoulders and
pitchforks vibes.
Not quite pitchforks, but just stumbling and getting scared and sweaty. I think that's Just Fine at the 600.
Yep.
They'll start fanning around him. He'll lead the race, but he was so perfectly rated by Geordie Childs to win the Bart Cummings and get into the Melbourne Cup. The ride's got him in the Melbourne Cup. Unfortunately, Geordie's not riding. Got Jai McNeil on, who has ridden a leader in a Melbourne Cup to win in Twilight Payment, but Twilight Payment's a far better horse than Just Fine. He was playing at Moonee Valley last start. His leading run, he's beaten 10.5. He'll lead, but not for a long way.
Yep, and he is a $46 chance on TopSport.
Under the odds.
Let's talk about horse 8 now in Land Legend. Draws barrier 18 for Chris Waller. Zach Purton, one of the best jockeys in the world. Wastes down to 53 kilograms to ride. From barrier 18, very elegant one from that barrier in 2021. Last start 3rd in the Caulfield Cup. Needs to make up some ground on Buckaroo from that Caulfield Cup. He's an interesting one. I see him as his biggest battle being himself, because he's shown poor manners at the moment. I wouldn't be inviting him to mum's for dinner just yet.
No.
I want to see him really put those manners together, but he has the Chris Waller polish, and I know he's been working hard behind the scenes to get him to settle, to get him on his best behaviour. Are you going to invite him to mum's for dinner?
No way. I think he'd grab mum's head and someone else's head at the table and start bashing them together. His behaviour's horrific. He'd smash plates. He wouldn't even offer to do the dishes. This guy's poorly behaved, and that's a knock, because if you're over racing and getting fierce and keen over 2,400 metres and it's costing you finishing closer in a Caulfield Cup, well, by gee, another 800 metres, you're just going to be wasting energy. I think he'll loom into the race, but he just doesn't conserve his energy enough mid-race to be able to finish off. His run in the Caulfield Cup was still admirable. He's finished third, and despite getting keen, he was able to hold on late. He beat home a few key rivals as well. His win in the Metrop was good. He duelled it out with Zardozi. He was also probably not there fitness-wise comparative to Zardozi that day, and they put a huge gap on third. Usually the Metrop form's no good, but the gap back to the rest of the field says that was a strong race. But for me, I need horses that are doing everything right to run out the distance, and that's why I've got some major queries with him running out the trip on Tuesday.
Well, I think he's got a huge ceiling, Land Legend, and he might feature a little bit later in my numbers, so it's just a little early insight there. Let's move on to horse number 9 now, Absurd, who's a $10 chance. He's the second of the Willie Mullins runners. Kieran McAvoy rides. He's drawn barrier 7. Which isn't a great sign because a horse hasn't won from barrier 7 since 1924. So I don't know if you like.
What's the 100? It could be 100 years.
Maybe there's something in that. Salts there featuring some numerology, maybe Salts.
That's sharp math.
Yeah,
we'll get Cam Mooney on the show.
He's a last start winner in the Chester Stakes, and this bloke's been seen going around over jumps as well. He's obviously come over here. I think he's just Vauban's mate, but do you give him a hope for winning?
Oh, look, he can win. He beat Vauban home last year. He loomed up to win last year. His run in last year's Melbourne Cup was quite good. Fast pace suited him there. Vauban got a better turn of foot. That win in the Chester Stakes, so at listed level, he beat a horse who was then subsequently fourth behind Kyprios and Sir William, but was beaten 5 lengths, and that horse did start $67, so the market didn't give much respect. But you can loosely tie that in because Vauban directly has been 2.5 lengths off Kyprios, which is world-class staying form. Of the two, though, that Willie's bringing out, Vauban's the class, and the market's reflected that the both times that they've come out, despite the fact that he was met with good late support in last year's Melbourne Cup. The stablemates still won a 550 against 9. The stablemate's shorter in this year's Melbourne Cup, and it's just because his European staying form is of high quality.
He's certainly been kept safe because he's a $10 chance at the moment. So they are keeping Absurd really safe at the moment. $10 chance in the Melbourne Cup. Let's move on now to horse number 10, Athabascan, trained by John O'Shea and Tommy Charlton. Zach Lloyd will ride from barrier 2. Last start ran first in the ATC St Ledger, and he was no match for Circle of Fire in the Sydney Cup at 3,200 metres last year when he had all the favours in the run, and Circle of Fire was wide and it was a fantastic win. That form is a long time ago now, but what do you make of Athabascan's hopes?
If Circle of Fire is beaten a length by Athabascan in that Sydney Cup, you say Athabascan won, but Circle of Fire was easily the run of the race. Well, he actually beat him home despite the fact he had a tougher run, and Athabascan followed him everywhere he went. So although Circle of Fire is not in that form, he's a better horse. Look, he's been building to 3,200 metres. He stepped to 2,600 metres in that St Ledger last start, the ATC St Ledger. That's not the right form for this. He was wide there. He did enough. Can't have that as the form for the Melbourne Cup. He does get some favours, though, from barrier 2. Gets a nice run in behind them. Look, he's some top 10 chance if they're not rolling along, and he's able to just conserve energy in behind the speed and poke through at the right time. But if he's running top 10, he's still going to be several lengths off the winner.
Yeah, and he's a big price as well. Athabascan, $41 at the moment on TopSport. Let's take a look at horse number 11, Knight's Choice, the 5-year-old here for John Simons and Sheila Laxon. And Sheila Laxon returns to the Melbourne Cup. She actually won the Cups double, the Caulfield Cup and the Melbourne Cup in 2001 with Ethereal. And look, with respect to Knight's Choice, he's no Ethereal at $126 Saltsy on TopSport.
No, and I feel if they had their time again, they'd rename him to Knight's Tail, and Heath Ledger would joust him back to Queensland. Seriously,
yeah,
because you just know I'm going no good. To find a couple of positives, his 2 best runs this preparation in Victoria have been on top of the ground, and he probably should have finished a little closer in the Bendigo Cup, but he's been beaten a long way by Buckaroo and a few key ones through a Turnbull and also a Caulfield Cup. And for me, if you drew him in the sweep, well, it might be a good result because you could get a bit of a payout for last.
Geez. That's about as good of push as you're ever likely to see.
Something's got to finish last, doesn't it?
It's true. It's very true. I've got one a little bit later who I think might finish last. But let's move on to horse number 12 now. Akita Sushi draws barrier 10, now trained by Kieran Maher. Jamie Carr will ride. Is it fourth time lucky for Jamie Carr? Won the Moonee Valley Gold Cup in the lead-in. 11th in the race last year. I don't know about you, but I think Akita Sushi now being trained out of Ballarat, but I'm certainly not one to buy sushi from Ballarat.
Nah, but this guy is going a little bit better than your sort of Sev Sushi.
Ooh.
He's not quite the sushi. He's not quite sort of, your high-class Japanese
Sushi,
CBD.
Is he sushi levels?
Yeah.
I reckon that's...
If you've got some ginger soy wasabi, you can spruce him up a bit.
There's nothing that a whole little soy fish won't fix to make a bad sushi roll good.
Yeah, and
you
also
you just douse
contrary
that
to the
shit
name, this
with-
horse actually isn't Japanese.
It's extraordinary.
It's from
It's Irish.
Ireland.
Yeah,
It's from Irish.
Yeah.
So I don't know about getting sushi over there, but the horse is building to something.
Yeah, it's
I
good point.
I couldn't talk someone out of making a case for this horse because he's started his preparation in August of 2024 after his only run prior to that was in the Melbourne Cup of last year when he was just fair. He's building nicely. He led a couple back with some favours at Caulfield, but then he won that Moonee Valley Gold Cup. He had a nice run in the 1-1. Jamie Carr on, lightweight, weight relief out of last start. He'll certainly be in the first half of the field getting some advantages if they're running it at an average tempo in the middle stages. I'm not talking anyone out of making a case for him. In terms of finding a spot for him in my top 10, geez, they're hard to all go in. I wanted to find a few things at a big price, but he'd be showing up in a lot of people's top 10s for good reason.
Yeah, $19 as well on TopSport, which certainly supports those top 10 claims. Saltsy, let's now take a look at horse number 13, One Smooth Operator, Brian Ellison, another import here who we've actually seen because his last start, he won the Geelong Cup in very nice fashion. Craig Williams rides, who's no stranger to a Melbourne Cup. And I tell you what, this bloke's got a smooth action, but it's been far from smooth sailing because there's been a little bit around with the vets, a little abscess of some sort on the foot, I believe. So they've had to go...
Nah, just cut on his heel.
Foot, was it?
Yeah,
Okay, so...
abscess on the foot, you'd be ruling him out.
Yep, gotcha.
But cut. Apparently, he's missed no work, and being kept safe in those early markets as well. So, I don't think we're putting too much of a negative on what's happened.
So all systems go for One Smooth
all
Operator.
systems
It
go,
was a bloody nice win in the Geelong Cup.
It was. In terms of the way a race is run for a horse with a turn of foot to display their best potential, he got some favours there. He showed he has a turn of foot, which in an even run Melbourne Cup, having a turn of foot's extremely important. So he's ticked that box, and that was the best performance of his career. If you told a UK form expert that One Smooth Operator would beat Home Vauban, they'd laugh at you. But it's about translating that form to other jurisdictions, and he's come to Australia and won well. They went hard in the middle stages in the Geelong Cup, then they jammed the brakes on to the 800.
It was a real slingshotty sort of stuff, wasn't it?
So for a horse that's done no early work, then they jam the brakes on, you can slide into the race for free, and then because they've backed that tempo off, the horse with the best change-up speed wins. So he had some favours, but it was a good performance, and he was only just off Seeking in an E-Bore. This year's E-Bore not as strong as last year's E-Bore, but it has produced several subsequent winners, and Seeking has also franked that form in Australia, winning a Bendigo Cup. So can't talk you out of him. Has to be running well. Genuine place claims.
One Smooth Operator, aptly named for the units here on 2 Units 1 Cup. Let's have a look at the first mare in the field. Horse number 14, Zardozi. Trainer James Cummings. Jockey Andrea Atzini, one of the world's very best. Now, last start's interesting here, Salts. 5th in an Empire Rose, which was actually yesterday, Derby Day, and was absolutely rocketing through the line. And there's a little bit of Bart Cummings about this for James because it's all about the miles in the legs. How do you see that lead in just the 3-day back up into the Melbourne Cup?
I love it. I love it because we don't see it much anymore as well, particularly the drop-in trip and then sharply back up again. as well, and it was a really encouraging run. A couple back, she had her chance to finish closer to Buckaroo in a Caulfield Cup and plain and simple got belted by him. So she needs to overturn a big margin on one of the leading contenders. But that drop back to 1,600 metres in the Empire Rose on Saturday, the way she hunted through the fence, says she's on track for this. And there's a high chance that she runs well, and genuine top 10 claims. A good performance won't be shocking anyone.
Yeah, I'm with you. I actually couldn't find a place for it in my top 10, but I love the lead in. I love the aggressive placement and the strategy that they're going. And you know what? They've tried something.
Yeah, spot on. And she also draws a nice gate.
Yeah, she certainly does.
She got a nice run just tucked in behind them, does no work.
And she is I'll give you the red hot tip right here on a $14 chance on TopSport is Zardozi. So she's well and truly in the market. She's been kept pretty safe, given that different type of lead-in compared to the rest of the field. We'll look at horse number 15 now, Sea King. A 6-year-old here draws barrier 1 for Harry Eustace, or we call him Bod, brother of David over here in Australia. Holly Doyle will take the ride. She rode Future History for David last year, so there's a little bit of just inception there for you amongst the family. Won the Bendigo Cup, which I believe you were at, and it was a great day, so it's the Bendigo Cup.
Yeah, if you haven't been out to Bendigo, get out there. It's an absolute brilliant cup day.
I don't know if anyone's heard, but Salt's had a good Bendigo Cup day.
Apparently the feedback was the coverage was powerful.
It was very powerful. You sort of preface Sea King's form before, along with One Smooth Operator. Are you going to be taking the Geelong Cup form or the Bendigo Cup form? Which form line's stronger, do you think, heading into the Melbourne Cup?
The Geelong Cup rated slightly higher, but there's not much between them. Geez, they were both equally as dominant.
The ride from Sea King we spoke at the top of the show, Declan Bates. You're like, oh, great ride, Declan Bates. I've never seen a horse just take a jockey into a race so cleanly and just...
Yeah.
You're watching from the 1,000. You're like, if you're anything else here, which I was, you were absolute confetti, your ticket, because this thing was bolting.
Yeah, but can you believe he went off $7? He went off the wrong price.
This is another, and there's been this is the second bit of post-race expertise from us today, if we want to throw Switzerland in as just sitting back and going, how obvious was this? When you go back through the European form, which you've already referenced with One Smooth Operator, it's pretty clear.
Yeah, well, it wasn't post-race for me because I backed him out.
Oh, here he is.
But
yeah, true.
You mentioned the fact that the horse towed him into the race. The ride was still brilliant because the reason why the horse was able to flow into the race at the right time was when I'd done my map, my concern over him in the Bendigo Cup was he can sometimes flop out, and from barrier 3, he was going to be on the fence and needing room. Declan got him off the fence at the very first opportunity, and that meant when the horse wanted to take off, he had the room to take off. From barrier 1, Holly Doyle, he doesn't get that opportunity in Melbourne Cup. He is highly, highly likely pegged on the fence, needing to weave his way through, just like he was in an E-ball where he weaved his way through and did beat home One Smooth Operator in that E-ball. And One Smooth Operator means him only a half kilo worse off at the weights. Look, he needs some luck from that low draw. He does strike me as a galloper that wants some room because he can be a bit headstrong, but the Bendigo Cup performance on a good 3-track, mind you, which we're likely going to be on Cup Day, was outstanding.
Yeah, he's $9.50 as well. He's one of the 4 runners in single figures on TopSport as of Sunday afternoon. Let's now take a look at horse 16, Valiant King, another of the Chris Waller runners. Craig Newitt rides, gets in at 50.5 kilos from barrier 22. He comes through the Caulfield Cup last start, 9th in that particular race as well, Saltsy. And you've got somewhat of a soft spot you've already mentioned about Valiant King.
Yeah, in terms of... he's not been one of my horses, but I think he runs well on Tuesday. He hasn't found his way into my top 4, but he'll be going in some wider exotics. Yeah, no doubt.
We love exotics too.
Yeah,
on a day like this because they're so fat.
Yeah, I'm a very disciplined punter, and I keep a spreadsheet, keep a track of all results, win bets when I get the right price, rare place bets when I can get the right price. But the Melbourne Cup's where I have a lot of fun. And I love putting on exotics. There's huge pools. You have a bit of fun. And this guy goes in some of my wider exotics as well for your first 4s and perhaps even trifectas, because I think he's building nicely. He was terrible first up at Randwick. Back towards the inside in a Turnbull, I thought he just poked through the line quite nicely. And then he's beaten 13 lengths in a Caulfield Cup, but he's back. He's the absolute widest of every runner in the Caulfield Cup on a day where it was enormous negative to be back on wide. And he ran past Circle of Fire, who is a much shorter price than him in the market. So, look, he needs some favours from barrier 22. His lead-in rating's poor, but he had those excuses. But I just thought there was enough in his Caulfield Cup run through the line. His last 200 metres was actually the fourth fastest of that Caulfield Cup, just to say that he might do something cheeky getting out to the 2 miles.
Currently $67 TopSport. If you want to wait till 3 p.m. on Monday, though, TopSport obviously have betting into 110% markets, so you'll get a much better price.
Yeah, you will be getting a much better price around that 3 to 4 o'clock tomorrow on TopSport.
Let's go to horse 17 now. Fancy Man for Annabelle Neesham and Rob Archibald. The 7-year-old carries 50 kilos, draws barrier 19. Good old Ronnie Stewart's coming down to ride. 6th in the Caulfield Cup last start, and he's a bit of a grinder.
Yeah.
Like you on the apps. Just a bit of a...
Careful. Good grief.
Jeez.
Well, post edit. He had the run. He had the run in that Caulfield Cup comparative to a few of the horses he beat home. So, I'm kicking up for Valiant King and he's beat him home, but the runs were just polar opposites in terms of favours to the track. He had a good run at Group 2 level prior to that at Caulfield, but I thought he was weak late. I've got high reservations on him running 3,200 metres. I'd be backing him for to finish in the bottom 3.
I like that. I wish we had a bottom 3 market here, courtesy
It'd be
of
good.
TopSport.
We need some real negative markets.
Yeah, I'm getting onto it. I want pull tail markets. We're all about pulling tails because we can, it's easier to find a loser than a winner, believe it or not, in racing. Let's go to horse number 18 now, which is interpretation. A 7-year-old, 50 kilos for Kieran Maher, T.O. Nugent. It's his 3rd go at the Melbourne Cup, if you don't mind. He failed to finish in 2022 before running 6th last year, and T.O. retains the ride. He was 2nd in the Geelong Cup. It was a very nice run behind One Smooth Operator, Saltsy.
Yeah, and he was 6th up in that Geelong Cup. It was his 6th run since running really well when coming 6th in last year's edition of the Melbourne Cup. So we know he can run out what was last year a strong 3,200 metres as well. Geez, he's building nicely. He was very good from the rear in an on-speed dominated Bart Cummings. And then last start getting on top of the ground at Geelong. I mentioned the fact that Geelong Cup, they bunched up at the 800, so it allowed One Smooth Operator who had a better turn of foot to drop him. But then through the line, Interpretation's last 200 metres was the fastest of that Geelong Cup, and he was steaming through the line. He's primed. He's in a stable that has set him for this race, so this will be his best run of the preparation. And if it improves off his Geelong Cup win, he can win.
Big push and a big price as well. You're getting around $19 on TopSport at the moment. So a big push there for Interpretation, who is horse number 18. We'll move on to 19 now, which is Manzoice, the 5-year-old here, the last of the Chris Waller runners. Declan Bates will steer. 21 career starts and is a Victoria Derby winner, but hasn't won since the Victoria Derby, which was 15 runs ago, Saltsy.
No, and he's just not going well enough. Look, he is a horse that can put himself in the race. He's shown a bit of tactical speed once he gets out in distance. So I think Declan Bates will no doubt be positive on him, but for his winning chances, that's really the only case you can make of him running a top 10 is if he just gets the right run and a few in behind get held up, because he was just even in that Moonee Valley Cup after having every chance in behind the leader. Although he has raced well at Flemington in the past, winning that Derby, I thought his run a couple back at Flemington was just fair in that Bart Cummings. I can't make a case for him.
You're saying the 2023 Derby form's not going to stack up in the Melbourne Cup. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it hasn't stacked up since because he hasn't won a race.
No doubt. Let's take a look at horse 20 now. Mostly Cloudy, the 6-year-old here for Trent Busserton and Natalie Young. Draws barrier 16, which was the same barrier without a fight. Won the Melbourne Cup from last year. Jockey Karis Teaton flies down to ride. Last start finished 12th in the Bart Cummings. And I tell you what, this stable's had a tumultuous week, so I'd see the likes of Muramasa, Braden Starr being scratched, who they were looking to have 3 Cup hopefuls, and now they've been left with Mostly Cloudy, who is a $101 chance on TopSport. Yeah,
there's a big difference. There's a couple of horses that might be $101 that you can't get the discrepancy between them. Like what price is Fancy Man?
Fancy Man's $101
yeah,
as well.
So there's no way that Fancy Man's $101 and so is Mostly Cloudy. But Mostly Cloudy will be beating Fancy Man home. I think he's suited getting back on top of the ground. He just hasn't appreciated his last 2 runs on wet tracks at Flemington. He's proven over 3,200 metres. He was also an absolute certainty beaten in the Brisbane Cup last year at Eagle Farm, this winter, over 3,200 metres. He was okay from too far back, only beaten 5 behind Circle of Fire in a Sydney Cup. So there's no issues on him running the trip. He's got a light weight. He's a really strong top 10 hope. When you're looking at $101 pops, he's one of the better $101 pops you'll see in terms of outstripping that price. He'll outperform that price, I have no doubt.
He could be one that you're chucking in your first 4s, perhaps if you're playing some wider exotics throughout the day.
Just some real juice in when you're boxing those first 4s. You might have a few different ones of them on. You might have one where you put your box 6 or 7 in there. He goes in one of them.
And we've seen those big odds before, like the likes of Shiraz, who we were talking about, who's run out 2 miles before. So
he started $200 last year, Shiraz. And he's run 3rd.
Bowie Mertens boots Shiraz home for 3rd. Aged well, they may say. Saltsy, aged well. Let's move on to horse 21 now. Positivity, the second of the 3 mares engaged in this year's Melbourne Cup. Andrew Forsman and Winona Costin combined. I'm not sure what their strike rate is. 8th in the Moonee Valley Gold Cup last start. Just the 12 career starts. So plenty of improvement to come for Positivity. Market suggestion is at $101.
Yeah, there's too much positivity from you over there. There's got to be some negativity.
I was trying to be some real glass half full stuff.
Yeah, can't win.
Do you reckon anyone on any runner by runner show has tried to quote the Andrew Forsman Winona Costin strike?
Well, if they
rate?
did, they would have had the numbers to back it up.
Mine was a joke because I don't reckon they've ever.
Surely not.
I don't reckon they've ever combined. That was the angle I was going for.
I actually think this thing's got a hope, but the jockey trainer combination, they're going at 0%.
That's what I was going for.
Good gag. I just stole it. I just worded it better.
Catch on.
Over race a couple back at Flemington, okay. Handy in the Moonee Valley Cup and plain.
22, St. George, Kieran Maher, Tyler Schiller combined 10 career starts, 2 wins. 5th in the Moonee Valley Gold Cup. You will not miss this bloke. You'd see him 24 hours of the day, St. George. He's a big, flashy grey. He was hot through the line in that Moonee Valley Gold Cup as well, Salty.
Yeah, he got some bar planes on as well, which is a negative gear change, but then improved his performance. So maybe whatever issue was hampering him, he didn't care less about, because that was the best run of his preparation. He got back, he ran through the line. It was a good run to step up in distance. His 2 best performances overseas were over 29 and 2,800 metres in the ballpark of 3,200 metres. Look, you could make a case for him running in the top 10 off his last start. Couldn't find him in mine, but I can see why people have made a case, because it was an encouraging performance at Moonee Valley last start.
He's one that's landed in my top 10 at a $26 chance on TopSport, has St. George. The Illawarra, we call him actually over here at 2 units.
Yeah.
So
I think I know you got him in your top 10, but I think he'll have a few knock-ons.
I think St. George actually finished 11th this year, so it might be a horrible sort of omen bet that in terms of top 10s, but there we go. Horse 23, The Map. She's a 6-year-old mare for Dan Clarkin and Uppy McGilvray. Rachel King rides, who's Mrs. Worldwide at the moment after riding in the Breeders' Cup over the weekend. Finished 6th in the Geelong Cup. She's as Aussie as you get, The Map. Bred in Tassie, trained in South Australia, loves Flemington. Won well on this day last year, was a good winner in the Andrew Ramsden, but she's just not quite showing the trajectory that you want to see since the Andrew Ramsden win.
No, and she won her way into that Ramsden, which is a golden ticket. Win and you're in. A race at Flemington back in May that says, all right, you're in the Cup. Now you can aim your whole preparation at the Cup. So she's being trained for her best performance to be coming today. So she has been building each of her runs this preparation. She's slightly improved, but she's still got to make up 5 lengths on one smooth operator from the Geelong Cup. I thought Interpretation was a much better run than her in the Geelong Cup, despite the fact she was in restricted room. I thought it was just a minor excuse. But she is being prepared for this, and she's only a lick away from winning an Adelaide Cup over 3,200 metres. So the rise in distance will suit. Look, I agree with the market in that she's not a winning hope, but she's a good local hope, a good locally bred hope that this is her grand final.
Yeah, she'd be an unbelievable story at $46 on TopSport, would the map. And the South Australians, well, they're flying at the moment. They've just they secured the Victoria Derby yesterday. It'd be some week if they ran very well in a Melbourne Cup. And we'll now take a look at the last horse, number 24, Trust in You, the 6-year-old for Bruce Wallace, Grant Cooksley, a Kiwi visitor here. Mark Duplessis will ride fourth in the ATC St Ledger behind Athabaskan last start. I'm not sure how the sixths in the Auckland Cup will measure up, but has seen 3,200 Salty.
Yeah. I've got full trust that this horse will finish in the bottom 5. Look, just plugged away in that St Ledger last start, beaten by Athabaskan, who's got a better map. He went forward last start, but he was sort of flopping out the gates prior to that. Look, he's going okay, but a Melbourne Cup's beyond him.
Well, he's $101, so on TopSport, so you can certainly understand.
So it's a good call by me.
I think it's a great call. Yeah,
I've gone out on a limb.
You really have. Yeah, you're gonna lay. You're gonna put up some liability on Trust in You.
No thanks.
Well, we've worked our way through the 24 runners for the 2024 Melbourne Cup. Let's just revisit the market quickly and recap how that looks. As we spoke about all that time ago, we had Vauban and Buckaroo at the top of the market. They're sharing $6 favouritism on Sunday afternoon as it stands. One Smooth Operator, the Geelong Cup winner, at $8. This is on the first page here. Absurd, a $10 chance. Salty gave some hope to the likes of Kovalika, who's a $23 chance. Akita Sushi, actually located at Cranbourne. I looked up, sorry for those at Ballarat, I still wouldn't buy sushi from Cranbourne, but a $19 chance nonetheless. Zardozi on the 3-day back up at $14. Then we flick over the page, seeking a $9.50 chance. The Bendigo Cup winner. Salts actually went to the Bendigo Cup for those that are playing at home that haven't heard, and he had a really good day. St George, $26. Interpretation, $19, who Salts also gave some hope for there in our runner-by-runner analysis. It's time to get into our $100 betting plays now, Saltsy. This is what we want. You nailed it last year. You had without a fight in your $100 betting plays. If you followed Saltsy on the 2023 edition, you came out in front. So I'm going to hand it over to you, the new ball. How are you playing your $100, mate?
Yeah, and the reason why I like the $100 betting play, you can use it as a percentage if you've only got $10. Well, then you just take a zero off.
You can call it 100 units.
Yeah, exactly right. And when people say, what's your Melbourne Cup tip, I'll send through 3. And if they say, well, if you had to just pick one, I say, I don't just pick one, because you back 3 and you make each of them a winning result. I like Buckaroo. For me, he's the best weighted horse in the race because he's the best performed horse in Australia at weight for age. The form around him is outstanding. There's always a query on a horse running out a distance if they haven't seen it before, but he's savaging the line in fast races. He's flying. He'll be rocketing home. I think he's our most likely winner. I have $60 to win on Buckaroo. His biggest danger, the market's got it completely right, in my opinion, is Vauban. They've got it right in the fact that they're the 2 favourites, but I can price them both slightly shorter, hence I can have something on them. $30 to win on Vauban. He is a horse that's the best credentialed stayer in terms of the staying form around him overseas. They had a go at it last year, the Willie Mullins camp. They made some mistakes. They're looking to rectify those mistakes. And if they do rectify it, I think it's with Vauban. And $10 to win on Interpretation. He's been building to this. I loved his work through the line in the Geelong Cup. And he's a horse that's looking for 3,200 metres. So $60 to win Buckaroo, $30 to win Vauban, $10 to win Interpretation.
Good case. You've sold it. You've sold it incredibly well to me.
It's my job.
Yeah, well, that's true. It's 90% sales, 10% results, apparently. But good luck. Let's head over to my $100 betting plays now. I'm backing up. I was with Vauban last year. I reckon the stable's getting it right this year. My eggs are in his basket. $70 to win on Vauban. He's going every bit as good as last year. Different preparation. Only has to carry half a kilo more. Top weight, but well weighted. We spoke about the compressed weight scale. Met Kyprios, as you mentioned, at level weight, 62 kilos, ran second. That's world-class form for a Melbourne Cup. I'm hoping he isn't a Calippo Frost in the 25-degree temperature that Flemington produces on Tuesday, but Vauban is my on-topper. $20, number 8 Land Legend. I'm inviting him to Mum's for dinner. I reckon he's going to be on his best behaviour. I've worded him up. Uncle Chrissy Waller's worded him up and said, hey, mate, on your best behaviour. And I've read and I've been reading, I've been paying attention to the interviews, and they've been hack cantering this bloke. They've been teaching him all the manners how to go slow. He did a track gallop out at Bendigo. I know you were there on Bendigo Cup Day. He was out there he was doing a track gallop.
Nice toot of your horn there that you can read.
And it was all about Land Legend and teaching him to go slow. And I think it's as good a push as any when a world-class jockey like Zach Purton wastes down to the weight to ride Land Legend and wants to stick, because he wouldn't be short of options in a race like this, would Zach Purton. So Land Legend, $20 on him at a price. And then I like to play the exotic salts. $10 box trifecta. Why bloody not? 1, 2, 8, 15 and 22. That's Vauban, Buckaroo, Land Legend, Sea King and St. George. I like the Bendigo Cup form of Sea King. I thought he looked terrific in that race, and St. George loved his work through the line in the Moonee Valley Gold Cup, and he looks like he's going to love 3,200, and geez, you won't miss him. He's a big flashy grey, and if you followed our promo video, always back the greys according to Uncle Bede. So we love the work of St. George. Let's take a look at the top 10 now, and the reason we put this up, viewers and listeners, these top 10s, is because these pools are huge on Melbourne Cup Day. We talk about exotics. There's so much money there. You can play around with a bit of value, change some combinations, and here's Saltsy's top 10.
Yeah, so my betting plays I've just restricted to win only, because you can just play around with these top 10s in terms of betting into your exotics, your first fours, your trifectas. Buckaroo, Vauban, Interpretation, I've spoken through them. Seeking, love the Bendigo Cup run. Kovalika, a really nice Melbourne Cup trial in that Caulfield Cup, strong through the line in an extremely fast race. Absurd, the stablemate of Vauban, ran well last year. One Smooth Operator showed good change-up of speed in the Geelong Cup. Valiant King won at a big price for your top 10s and your multiples. Good against the pattern of Caulfield Cup. Zardozi, loved what they did to her on Saturday, dropping her to the mile in the Empire Rose. She draws a nice gate, which I think takes her a long way. And Mostly Cloudy, another one at triple figure odds that I think he's over the odds for your multiples, and he's one that's been able to run well at 3,200 metres in the past.
My top 10, obviously I've got Vauban and Land Legend there, who I've pushed their case prior. Buckaroo has to go in. He's got the premier form reference coming through. Love the way he closed off in the Caulfield Cup. Still just have a slight query at 3,200. Want to see it, need to see it, might see it. Sea King, as I mentioned, loved the Bendigo Cup form. St. George, he's won at a bit of a price. Absurd, the stablemate to Vauban, he'll run all day. He'll run an extra lap if you need to. He's been over the hurdles. That might even sharpen him up, but if it becomes some form of staying test, he'll be there. One Smooth Operator, the Geelong Cup form, well, he finished off beautifully. You mentioned that slingshot into the race, a beautiful turn of foot. Interpretation comes through that same race. Circle of Fire, is there still just a lighter? Like I'm in the back of the crowd. I'm just waving a lighter for him. I'm trying to start something. And Kovalika, it's just, there's a little bit of a sniff about Very Elegant about that through that Cox Plate run, Kovalika. So want to keep that safe and include in some multiples. But they're our top 10s, mate. All the very best for Melbourne Cup Day.
Oh, thank you very much, mate. All the best to you as well. May the best horse, the best ride, win the Melbourne Cup. And hey, if you're a new listener to the units, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully we've given you a bit of information about the Melbourne Cup to help you enjoy the big day.
Absolutely. That's what it's all about. It's the water cooler talk. It's the barbecue on Tuesday. But don't forget to hop on TopSport at 3 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on Monday, because you will be betting into 110% markets on the Cup from 3 to 4. It's an hour of power, and they're guaranteeing you to win at least $10,000 if you want to get on. It's a great deal to really if you're heading into the Melbourne Cup on Tuesday. Saltsy, it's been a lot of fun. I'll be out on course. I'll be going to make sure that Vauban is not a Calippo Frost in the yard. I'll be telling him and giving him the thumbs up.
You're going to go with perhaps a bit of a sort of a follow him around the yard with a bit of a fan,
maybe? Bit of a fan, a little bit of a spray bottle,
yeah,
that sort of stuff, bit of a towel, wipe
You'll
him
probably
down.
get arrested, but
I think I might.
Your $100 betting play might salute.
Yeah, unfortunately the 2 units media accreditation didn't go through this year for the Cup Carnival, but we'll get there next year.
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting, but this is for the reason why. Hey, it's been a lot of fun on the 2 Units 1 Cup, a podcast, the Stops a Nation. All the very best. We'll be back on Thursday to preview Champions Stakes Day, which is our favourite day of the year, but thanks for joining in. Good luck.